Parapolitics and precious metals, currency and current events, markets and the monetary system, wealth and warfare. Still waiting for that terminal rate. Bring down the volume a little bit. What an apropos intro song. It's not my permanent intro song, but it is money for nothing out there, don't you think, ladies and gents? It's Monday. It's the 15th of January, 2024. Lots to cover today. Oh, metals Monday, monetary Monday. It's good to start your week out just getting a baseline of what's real. What's real, what's fake. Whole lot of fake out there. I'm going to jump into some tweets today too. I thought there was some great tweets by Robert Kiyosaki and the Gold Telegraph, which I have no affiliation with, but has a great account. Some key insights over there. I mean, turn the intro all the way down. No more fun. All right, welcome everyone to the Wise Wolf Gold and Crypto Show. We're streaming live on freeworld.fm as well as all the technocratic approved platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. For now, I'm still on there. I try not to skirt too much into my alternative media, my conspiracy theory of history hat. I try to keep that somewhat separate from this show, but you guys know me. And if you want more, you can go check out Paratruth or you can check out the Art of Burn radio transmission. But I wanted to do this show, and I've been doing it for a couple of years, but I wanted to really just let's focus on the money aspect. Let's focus on the currency, because honestly, that's where everything comes out of. Like that's where every bit of the news comes from our currency creation, currency manipulation, value, all of that, everything. The deep state's funded by unlimited fake fiat currency creation. That's it. The welfare warfare state all stems from fake fiat currency creation and debt. And we're swimming in debt. As a matter of fact, just a couple of stories at the end of the show about the world's richest people and how much their wealth has gone up. And that's probably debatable, but there's a reason for that. And it's because the lack of understanding of money is really what value is. And the difference between currency and money, because they don't teach you that in school, that's what keeps everybody from being able to compete and to make a better product or bring something to market, because we're just too busy. We have to constantly chase those green pieces of paper to pay the bills. And so that's why baseline education is important. We start the Mondays off with the Wise Wolf Gold and Crypto Show. And I will go to the chat. If you guys got any questions or you want to comment, we're streaming live on rockfin.com as well on the America Unplugged channel. And if I can see the comments, I'll get to them for sure. Well, I was on the David Knight Show last week. Every Thursday, unless something comes up, I go on the David Knight Show around 9:30 a.m. Central Time for about 30 minutes or so. And sometimes David and I get talking and it goes a little longer. But it's usually just to update his audience, and David and I share intelligence. What are you seeing on the ground? What's happening with gold? What's happening with Bitcoin? What's happening with the markets? And David brought to my attention this story, and it had gotten past me, which is odd because I've run in Texas elections before. I should have known better, but the Texas GOP, for all its faults, somebody over there got something I think interesting and could be very valuable on the ballot. It looks like, and that's a move to support gold through the Texas Depository and making it a legal tender. But let me, and of course, this is just a primary initiative, but at least sets the tone. Let me put this up on the screen real quick. I've seen these kind of initiatives before, and it does it sets a tone. I think it's good to get into people's minds, because this is the trend, and this is where we're going to be going. I feel like I'm Marty McFly on Back to the Future. It gets through playing his solo. gets into some Van Halen type stuff and then some free floating solo heavy metal. And he looks around and he says, oh, I guess you guys aren't ready for that, but your kids are going to love it. I think that's kind of like me. Definitely on the horizon, more of these kind of stories. This is Texas GOP moves to support gold again through Shift Gold is the article and carried by Zero Hedge. This March, Republican primary voters in Texas won't just be choosing which candidates to represent their party in November. They will also be voting on a series of ballot propositions that, while not legally binding, offer a way for voters to guide their leaders. Here's what's happening in Texas. Among the ballot propositions is one for the Texas government to have Texas State Comptroller's Office start a program to administer access to gold and silver through the Texas Bullion Depository for use as legal tender. Texas already has a state-run depository for precious metals that began operations in 2018. It's probably not a surprise that after years of harsh inflation, Texas voters would be sympathetic to the use of precious metals as legal tender. Texas isn't alone in taking steps towards gold as legal tender. As reported earlier by Shifts Gold Michael Maharrey, lawmakers in Florida and Oklahoma have introduced bills into their respective state legislatures that would follow Texas by creating their own state-run depositories. And let me stop here. So key. This has to happen state by state, municipality by municipality, even down to the county level. The decentralization is what is so important here going into the next 5 years, 5 months, really. I mean, the central bank digital currencies, folks, the white papers are drawn up, the plans have been implemented. You're talking about top level down, the top control down from the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, through places like the Central Bank of the United States, also known as the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank. They're all pushing a central bank digital currency. The way you fight back against central bank digital currency, which are Luciferian bankster notes made digital, okay, it's a satanic program. It's not even about economics. Okay, kind of like the World Economic Forum is not about economics. it's not about, even though that YouTube put a disclaimer on my page for Wikipedia to show folks what the Great Reset actually was through the World Economic Forum, whatever. But it's not about economics. Okay, this is about politics, and politics are about control. And there's a few people at the top that want to control all movement, all things, right? All destinies. And that's why it's so important. And I think even this show today is going to show that even some people at the top realize there's probably an inevitability that this doesn't work out for them. I think they're still going to try it, and we still have to resist it. But this is great. This is good news. Even if it's a primary ballot measure, even if it's just getting on the ballot, that's all that matters, is that in the consciousness of people that you show them what money is. Because once you do that and you're, gold and silver in your hand, no counterparty risk, then what do I need the central bank for? What do I need the government for? Why do I need to give up my biometrics and all of my identification and all of my liberty and all of my hope for a future to a Luciferian bankster system where I program in what I can and can't buy, and they program in it make my currency expire? I mean, you guys, one of the reasons that I keep broadcasting, because I'm bored of politics, to my core. I despise it, but I keep broadcasting because I need people to understand what the central bank digital currency is. Okay, it's at this point. It's my raison d'etre, and I love these kind of stories. And I know I'm Tony, you're getting off topic. Yes, I'm not really off topic. I'm getting off article, but this is what you need to pay attention to and support these kind of things. I even said on David Knight Show, I'm not even sure this wouldn't hurt my business. I don't care, because liberty is more important. See, I'm not one of these political class automatons for the New World Order. I actually care about the future of my children and whether or not they have whether or not they have liberty. So what's happening in Texas matters and has an impact on the future of gold. Politically, Texas is not just the second most populous state; it is also the most populous red state. Well, Okay. Unlike Vegas, things that start in Texas tend not to stay there. Texas, like Florida, introduces policies that tend to spread nationwide. Texas was the first state to introduce state run depositories, and it looks like other states may be following in the near future. Plus, the pro gold movement in Texas isn't being pushed by a particular politician who will eventually retire or be voted out of office. It's being driven by grassroots political demand of Texas Republican voters. And since the Republican Party controls Texas government, successful ballot propositions from Republican voters often become law. Oh, just think what Texas could do if the politicians actually reflected the people. I mean, I know for a fact they don't. Sorry. Um, there's a lot of great Texans and great leaders and people in business, but you just don't see a lot of crossover into the political spectrum. That's because it takes a certain kind of dead soul. People like that, I guess. Will this ballot proposition succeed in the Texas GOP primary? If history is any guide, then yes. In 2022, Texas GOP primary voters voted on 10 ballot propositions, and all 10 of them passed. And while politicians may not always listen to voters and the government can sometimes move slowly, some of these propositions have already been turned into Texas law on areas ranging from transgender issues to teaching of critical race theory. The ballot proposition is also important because it shows the underlying stable grassroots demand for the use of gold and silver as an investment, not just as an investment, but also as currency. When the government or Wall Street or Silicon Valley billionaires push a new financial product, there's often some special interest or unsavory connections lurking in the background. For example, the SEC's Gary Gensler, who seems poised to back crypto ETFs, has close ties to the family of Caroline Elson, the crypto CEO of SBF, ex-girlfriend. Well, there's always a connection there. And then you can don't get me started on FTX and where the ruling party, and especially the globalist politicians and the left and the Democratic Party and the money laundering through Ukraine and all that stuff. I mean, come on, don't get me started. And I think that whole thing, if you want my opinion, I'm not a crypto expert. I've been in the Bitcoin space for a long time, but I'm not a crypto expert. I just will say it looked like an inside job to me, like just to discredit everything crypto was. That's again, and we're going to talk a little bit about the ETFs as well for Bitcoin today. Gold has retained its central place and enduring value without legions of high paid lobbyists or paid off policymakers, but still, demand from consumers, investors, and governments around the world means gold is still too important to ignore. That's why pro gold initiatives like eliminating the capital gains tax on the sale of gold or silver keep cropping up in states around the nation. As long as America is a republic, it seems likely that voters will always favor the stability of gold over endless years of inflation that eat away the dollar. That's a great article, and that's good news. So this is all part of the decentralization strategy, getting away from this is whether I like it or you like it or anybody else likes it or not. The dollar as we know it historically is changing shape, and it's not going to zero. I don't even think it's going to hyperinflation like Weimar Republic Germany in the early 30s with wheelbarrows full of cash or anything like that. It's not going to that. It's going to digital. And it's going to lose its status as the world's reserve currency. It's right now it's known as King Dollar, and I think that reign is coming to an end. And it's not because I have an opinion about that or I have a feeling. I'm just reading statistics. I'm looking at history, looking at trends. If you look at the trends from the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, 40% of the world's population wants to dump the dollar. They're a third of the world's economy. And they're gaining traction with Saudi Arabia, with Mexico, places like Japan, all these periphery nations that are energy rich, that are production rich, that want to get away from the dollar. Now, why do they want to get away from the dollar? That's because a lot of arrogant politicians and globalist puppets who run the United States, weaponize the dollar, in my opinion, to sabotage it. You have 40 different sanctions in 36 different countries. It's probably grown since then. That's a statistic that I researched a couple of years ago. But you look at the amount of usage. Okay, that's another thing to watch. 75% of all global transactions in 2001, 75% were done in dollars. In 2023, it was down to 45%. I don't even know what it is now. And that's, it really accelerated after the Biden administration put sanctions on Russia after Russia invaded Ukraine. And again, you could go over what are all the geopolitical conditions that made Russia invade Ukraine? What was that about? Well, more weaponization of the dollar. You see Iran, Iran and Russia made announcements officially last week, but we've known for a long time, they don't do business in dollars at all. Matter of fact, the country of Iraq, remember Operation Iraqi Liberation, OIL? I was part of that. We were going to make the world safe for democracy. Remember? They don't use dollars either. They actually made it illegal in Iraq to use dollars. Did you know that? I remember trading in dollars. Some people ask me, I've been asked before, what's the greatest entrepreneur you ever met? I'm like, it's the little Iraqi boy that was selling me a soda when things were on fire. And I mean, just got there, like the Republican Guard had fell, Mosul was open. We're running around. We didn't have maps, and we're trying to figure out what's what. And there's a kid selling me a cold Pepsi, trading in dollars. See, there's a reason why the dollar, for all the damage and stupidity that's gone on in Washington, through all the welfare warfare state, through all the debasement, through taking the silver out of our coins, from Nixon taking us off the gold standard, August 15th, 1971, through all of that, through all the manipulation, through Rumsfeld not being able to find $2.3 trillion on September 10th, 2001. Remember that? Through all of that. The reason it survives is because it's used around the world. It's ubiquitous. 80% of all the $100 bills ever printed aren't in the continental United States. 65% of all paper currency ever printed is not inside the continental United States. That's why you don't have Weimar Republic hyperinflation, even with the inside job of the globalists who run the United States of America. I have other names for them, but you get my drift, right? You understand what I'm laying down here, which is that stupidity eventually comes to an end. It's like Herbert Stein's law, the old speechwriter for Nixon. It's a joke, but Herbert Stein's law says that if something cannot go on forever, it will stop. Well, it's going to stop. And so these kind of things, whether it's the primary initiative for voters and, again, other states making it legal tender, taking away the capital gains, because it's not a commodity. Gold is money. Silver is money. Yeah, they're monetary. They're also using other things, and silver especially. We don't talk enough about silver. Honestly, my job, like bringing you, there's almost no stories on silver. I feel like, do we have to write them ourselves? Like, there's almost nothing ever on silver. That's probably a tell of why you should pay attention, because it's not very popular. But you see all of these things coming together, and I think it's more like a Hemingway-esque, that statement from one of Hemingway's books when he asked one of the men who'd gone broke, he was rich once and he went broke. He said, "How did you do that?" He said, "Gradually, then suddenly." And in the modern era, if you watch like the disappearance of the Soviet Union, nobody could have predicted. I mean, almost no. Well, some people did, but it's very few. It was very counterintuitive to think that, in 1979, when they invade Afghanistan, as the mighty Soviet Empire, the clash between the United States of America and this, first in space with Sputnik, and they have nuclear submarines and ICBMs. And if you told somebody, hey, by Christmas of 1990, they'll disappear off the face of the earth and break into 16 pieces and just gone, nobody would have believed you. Well, that's the modern era. That's how fast things go now. So all I'm saying is be prepared, and we'll make a transition into the next story. I want to stay on gold for a second. And this is fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? The FUD. The FUD drives a lot of monetary metals, but I think there's more than that. It's a trend. It's kind of unspoken. You see, and again, the financial networks They're never going to tell you. They're going to, have somebody screaming that you should buy FANG stocks and tech and, oh, look at the returns on this blue chip. I don't know. I own a little bit of stocks. I buy mining stocks. Some we'll probably do some shows on it this year. But I stick to something usually, whether it's my own business or, having gold or silver or Bitcoin outside of counterparty risk in my own possession, not an ETF. But let's take a look at this article up on Kitco. I just got a few things that we can glean from it. Geopolitical uncertainty and Fed rate cuts driving gold price momentum next week. There's going to be a lot of momentum in this year. January historically has been good for gold, but I think we're going to see, even with this, there's still going to be on the horizon even more change. Let's go into this article from Kitco. Again, geopolitical uncertainty and Fed rate cuts driving gold price momentum next week. Market conditions are aligning for the gold market as the precious metals benefit from safe haven demand and growing expectations that the Federal Reserve will cut rates sooner than expected. I think they will too. We're in an election year, folks, and this is ramping up. It doesn't feel, I don't want to get off into politics. It doesn't feel like it to me that we're in any kind of election year. It feels dystopic. I don't know about you. There's something wrong with it. Like it's a cheap imitation of what seems like a normal cycle for American politics. Maybe, once you threw the scamdemic into everything and the lockdowns and you're not essential, it really changed the way people look at politics. It's certainly changed the way I view things. The gold market is ending this week with resistance at 2050. This again was written on Friday. And according to some analysts, the precious metal still has room to move higher as bullish momentum is just starting to pick up. February gold futures are looking to end the week at 2047 an ounce, nearly unchanged from last Friday's close. Although the yellow metal is unable to close the week with a gain, some analysts note that the investors shouldn't be too disappointed as prices are well off their 4-week lows. Well, that's true. Again, you can watch these ups and downs, but I tend to look at the bigger picture, longer trend lines. There's going to be profit taking. There's going to be spikes in the price. You're going to see all sorts of things like that. The keys to remember when you're looking at precious metals and pricing is that, again, you're not looking at something going up necessarily in value, although gold is becoming more rare because the central banks are buying them at a record pace. We've not seen since the 1950s central banks buying gold, and people are buying gold. China doesn't export gold. They don't ever export any gold. They have 60,000 gold mines. Their people keep gold. So there is a lot of gold has been taken off the market. But what's really happening is that your dollar is losing purchasing power. And when things like the Fed rate cut are announced, even though everybody knows that inflation is not you can't get inflation under control with fake money. Washington's not going to stop spending. They long since threw the governor off. They just ripped the knob off. There's no stopping Washington, D.C. from unlimited money printing. It's even an open question. Why is there even an income tax if there is no accountability? Like you say, we can't pay for things, but you just make the currency out of nowhere. Everybody knows that's going to continue. And the Federal Reserve is going to have to goose the economy through lowering rates. And they will do that in 2024. And they have rate cuts planned for 2025. Quantitative easing, QE, is the only really choice they have in the face of all the damage that's been done and what the markets look for. They look for debt. They need cheap fiat currency debt creation. That's what they're doing. Gold is seeing renewed interest from safe haven demand as investors look for some portfolio insurance ahead of the weekend due to growing turmoil in the Middle East. Gold's rally came after the U.S. and British warplanes, ships, and submarines launched dozens of airstrikes across Yemen in retaliation against Houthi forces for months of attacks on cargo boats in the Red Sea.
Remember that the Houthis are in Yemen are a proxy of Iran. We're fighting Iran. Saudi Arabia, the United States, Israel are fighting Iran, and that is a proxy war through Yemen. Okay, remember this is all. That's what Gaza is. That's what that is an extension. Hamas is an extension of Iran. These are nation-state wars, not wars against the rebel forces or whatever organizations that are being fought. Okay, just remember that. Tensions have continued to escalate as a result of the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Now that the US and UK are going all in, traders have run for safety, said Naeem Aslam, chief investment officer at Zai Capital Markets. At the same time, gold has benefited from growing expectations that the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates as early as March. Markets continue to price in aggressive rate cuts, even as U.S. Central Bank has signaled that it sees 3 rate cuts this year. According to the CME FedWatch tool, markets see a nearly 80% chance of easing in March. Okay, so that's an 80% chance that the CME FedWatch sees that the Fed is going to lower rates. Maybe they won't even wait that long. Depends on, these are Super Tuesdays coming up in March. You've got the primaries. I mean, they're holding at this point. Is it a coronation for Trump? Or are they going to have some sort of surprise, some sort of Nikki Haley warmongering surprise in there for the GOP? I don't have a dog in the fight. I just asked the question. And of course, the other open question is: is Biden going to be replaced? Are they going to have to? Is there going to be some sort of shock to the system? Remember in all of this that the trend is that you can't rely on today to be like yesterday. It's very easy to do. It's called normalcy bias. And what I'm trying to do right now is remember that in this decade, we opened up with a bang. Remember, for January of 2020, I'll never forget, I was on air and Trump had just assassinated taken out with a strike, the General Soleimani in Iran. The hashtag was World War III. I was on the air hosting for David Knight at InfoWars. First broadcast of the decade there. And I was hosting, and the hashtag was World War III. It felt very surreal, like we were opening up 2020 in this decade with a bang. It has not disappointed. Like if you're looking at being inside of what the Chinese curse, which is "May you live in interesting times," we're definitely there. So don't get caught in what if today is today or tomorrow going to be like today because yesterday was. Don't do that. Because I promise you, there's black swans. There's probably a flock of black swans. Okay, it's not just one in the coming months and years, and this will be no exception. Talking about the geopolitical upheaval here. Let's see. I want to bounce around this article and see if it's just a lot of speculation on the price of gold. Yeah, however, not all analysts are optimistic that gold prices can go higher. Economists at Commerzbank said they still expect the Federal Reserve to cut rates only in May. Well, then, a normal situation, I think you'd be right. But you guys realize that going into 2020, sometimes it's good to just take a minute and reflect. Where have we been? Where are we going? At the end of 2019, it's a really interesting last quarter. You had the largest exodus of CEOs in history. What did they know? Largest golden parachutes. Largest exodus of CEOs in history. End of 2019, going into 2020. So there's also another, and I talk about this all the time. You go look it up. There's an underlying story there too. Largest exodus of CEOs, multinational corporations, gone. Golden parachutes, bye. And also something that was happening parallel to that time frame was the Federal Reserve and other central banks all around the world propping up their liquidity markets in the overnights called repos. I told this story last week. I'm going to keep it on the radar because you need to pay attention. This is before 2020. They put in $6 trillion. The Fed, just the Fed, not to mention the other banks. Nobody knows what that is, what that number is, but they were all doing it. They were propping up their own liquidity markets so that financial transactions could clear. All right, that's the last quarter of 2019. So all of the money printing and all of the debasement and all the things that have happened since then, since the lockdowns, you're not essential, remember? The big box is, but you're not. All of that debasement, everything that's gone on. And silver's still cheap, gold's still cheap. I mean, relative to what's gone on, 80% of all the dollars created, and this is what, and you still have gold under 3,000. And another open question as we move on to crypto. If rate cuts in the past stopped inflation, because that's technically that's what you were looking for in the 1970s with Paul Volcker, head of the Federal Reserve. They had interest rates going into the teens, and that shrank the money supply enough to get inflation at the time under control. Remember, the debt of the U.S. was right under $1 trillion. This was 1980. So right under $1 trillion. It's 34 trillion, by the way, right now. So it took us from 1776 to 1979, 1980 to hit $1 trillion in debt. But it only took us from 1980 to 2024 to hit 34 trillion. So they shrunk the money supply then, and it kind of worked. And they went to war with gold, and they went to war with the Hunts, who tried to corner the silver market, and they quelled that. The monetary system moved on. But you're talking about massive manipulation, debasement, waste, no fiscal sanity whatsoever. They raised rates faster than any time in history. Jerome Powell just did, faster than any time in history. Rate hike. They said they were going to get there, that inflation was temporary, transitory. Well, if that's the case, then why didn't the price of gold go to $1,000? Why didn't the price of gold go to $1,500? It didn't do any of those things. It stayed right here. It stayed in the 18 and 19, 2000 range, right there. Didn't even move it. Matter of fact, it went up. That's because there's a global trend going on, and it's the banks and then the corporations and the people. And there's a trend. It's just like Texas getting gold on the ballot, just like people buying gold at Costco and selling out. You should have called me. I would have had it. Or going to Walmart and selling out. Should have called me. I would have had it. Yeah, don't go to the big box stores. Call Wise Wolf. I'll lock in your price. Big box can't do that. Plus, you get to hang out with Beans if you come by the shop. All right, let's jump into some news on crypto. Which, when I say crypto, we're going to cover some altcoins this year for sure, and I probably will do some of that in the podcast itself. So if you're catching me on any of the live shows, I'll go live on all my channels usually. So if you're interested in some more, I don't know, just deep dives or again, it's not a live discussion usually. Go to the podcast. I'm going to have some altcoin specialists in there, and we'll talk. Even people in the metals markets and stuff. I got interviews lined up. So go subscribe to the Wise Wolf Gold and Crypto Show on the podcast itself, because I'll have some other things. It's hard to do this in an hour. Plus, we're on freeworld.fm. I need to check the chat over there as well, and I'll get to that. But let's jump into some news on crypto. Now, you had the release of the Bitcoin ETF last week. I read the story at the beginning of last week about Plato's Cave and the ETFs, and why people are just needing that approval from Wall Street and the establishment. If we could just get the fiat currency system interested in Bitcoin, you know, and I see some of the logic there, from a business standpoint, but you're talking about two opposing things. Let's let's jump into this. Let me see which one I want to go to first. I know that yeah, let's talk about the Bitcoin approvals. Let me see if this is the one I got here. Not quite. Hold on. Let me go to the Bitcoin approvals here. This was on Kitco. Sorry guys, I'm my own producer today, as always. They had an article asking about, is Bitcoin getting an ETF, is that going to keep it from being banned? And I'll read just a little bit. I have an opinion on this because there's another follow-up article that a statement from Larry Fink from BlackRock. And I've got some opinions on this. Is Bitcoin ban possible after SEC's spot Bitcoin ETF approvals? Again, this is kitco.com. As Bitcoin gets embraced by a wider audience via the new spot Bitcoin ETFs, is the asset still at risk of being banned in the U.S.? Author of The Bullish Case for Bitcoin of Vijay Boyapati warns that Bitcoin might not be out of the woods yet. Markets cheered the momentous achievement in the Bitcoin space as the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission approved 11 spot Bitcoin ETFs, including from BlackRock, Van Eck, ARK, and Invesco. The green light for spot ETFs will shift Bitcoin from being an asset owned essentially by retail investors to a global macro asset owned by hedge funds, institutions, and even nation states. Well, nation states already owned it anyway. Boyapati told Michelle McCory, lead anchor and editor-in-chief at Kitco News. Yeah, so I think this is a good thing. Okay, so I'm not cheering it like it's a breakthrough of epic proportions, but I think what you're witnessing here is not so much the belief that Bitcoin is like the greatest investment of all time. It may be, I don't know. I'm not giving you investment advice. I'm in the money business. I'm in the asset business. I'm not giving you investment advice. You can do your own research, but I will say this is something momentous in the sense that you have these giant institutions who, if you've paid attention over the last many years, you've had people like Warren Buffett has called Bitcoin rat poison. Jamie Dimon, whatever his name is, right, from JP Morgan. He has weighed in on Bitcoin many times, and I've often thought that there was some kind of way to flip it and buy in, and I don't know. I can't prove any of that, right? We don't know, but do you trust your bankster CEO? And of course, I don't know what Jamie Dimon's real role is here. He's always talking about economic superstorms. He doesn't talk like any bankster I've ever heard. He definitely doesn't cheerlead. It's really strange, but they're not enthusiastic. None of these guys have been holding up Bitcoin and saying, look, this is the future of money. Because honestly, it's the inverse of everything that they stand for. The establishment in the banking system stands by the fiat currency model of the central banks because, well, that's their bread and butter, right? That's why you have things like ESG. You have environmental social governance, which is just a way for banksters always like to support Marxism. That's why the fifth plank of the Communist Manifesto is a central bank, and we definitely have that because we have the Federal Reserve. But if you look at it, they have attached themselves to that unlimited printing supply of fiat currency known as the central banks. They love it. They love the stock market. They love all the things because it's unlimited, it's debt-based, and they want the public in there. I don't know what's happened, but I think the writing on the wall is Bitcoin, in my opinion, and again, my opinion, not a technical analyst or anything, but I've read paper after paper after book after book. I don't think it can be taken out. You can ban it all you like. But again, did prohibition work in the United States? What's the latest from from the Volstead Act? Did that work? as the, and I'm not comparing Bitcoin to drugs or alcohol, but it's something like that, right? Could you just going to ban it? Does it work? If it's something sound and it's easy to use, are people going to use it outside of your system? What, are you going to ban it and replace it with a central bank digital currency? They certainly had Elizabeth Warren. She put on the war paint, and she went out there and that Bitcoin is used in money laundering and drugs and terrorism. The U.S. dollar is clean, all that, by the way. No, actually, the U.S. dollar dwarfs cryptocurrency. It's not even in the ballpark of competing with the dollar on illicit use. Every currency has that. But Elizabeth Warren, she's trying to, I think that was their last effort before this spot ETF thing took off. Even the board of the SEC, there was a great many of that, especially on the left loves unlimited currency creation in big banks. Okay, let's just get with, and they love multinational corporations, whole cloth. Okay, they love them, and they don't want them to be threatened. But some of these other institutions like BlackRock, and I want to read something from Larry Fink here in a second. Not that I have any love or affection or appreciation or admiration for Larry Fink or BlackRock or Vanguard or any of these things. But I think some of them have to have run the simulations. There's been too much adoption. Bitcoin has been around too long. The time to kill it was in the crib, and I don't think they can do it now. And so if that's the case, if they've accepted the inevitability, and it looks like with spot ETFs and these institutions putting their stamp on it, and you can write me and say, Tony, the Bitcoin was not, whatever it is, and Satoshi Nakamoto is not real. I don't know. I'm just saying right now there's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be created in the system. That is a completely that's an inverse model to unlimited. Unlimited currency creation means no stable value and on a long enough timeline to zero. On the other hand, with Bitcoin, 21 million ever in existence. That's it. All right. That's a completely different model. That's scarcity. That means it's getting harder, and the dollar and currency around the world is getting softer by the day, and eventually going digital. Like it will disappear into the ether. So this is something to, again, what's the philosopher Schopenhauer, 19th century German philosopher? He said the truth went through three phases. First, it's mocked. Second, it's violently opposed. And the third and final phase, that it's accepted as common sense. Remember that. All right. And I want to bring up this article from Larry Fink while we're in the same line of logic here. Let's see if I can get to it. Where is that? It's tough to find on. Let's see if it's even in that deal. Well, you never know if I can even find the articles anymore. There it is. All right. This is Larry Fink. This is Bitcoin Magazine. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink says Bitcoin is an asset class that protects you. Now, again, this is coming from Larry Fink, the same guy who, if you go back, and I'm going to paraphrase, when he talked about mandates for certain shots and things like that, he said that they could change behavior. They have to change behavior from the top down. Right? Is that why they're buying all the single family homes? They can change your behavior, and if you can have a house or rent one or not. This is the world's largest asset manager CEO says Bitcoin is no different than what gold represented for thousands of years. In a notable statement, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink has expressed a positive perspective on Bitcoin during an interview today with CNBC, affirming that it is an asset that protects you. I believe it goes up if the world is frightened. If the people have fearful geopolitical risks, they're fearful of their own risk. Fink's recognition of Bitcoin as a protective asset suggests helps shift the narrative surrounding the digital currency, emphasizing its role as a safeguard amid economic uncertainties. The endorsement from the head of the world's largest asset management firm is a significant milestone for Bitcoin's acceptance within mainstream financial circles. Yeah, Harps in the chat on YouTube said, "What if Bitcoin was only ever put out to get people to use CBDC in the first place?" Well, that's a great question, Harps, and I am not unaware of those linkages. I would just say the model, and I think the hope would be something like Nigeria. See, that's what Nigeria was, a test model for central bank digital currency. If you go back and you look at, they had a massive Bitcoin adoption, and the banksters came in and said, "Oh, let's give them central bank digital currency. They're already used to digital wallets. They're already used to digitize, currency and all. Let's just get them the central bank CBDC. We'll control the money supply. We control what they buy and spend." Nobody wanted it. It was a complete flop, and people kept using Bitcoin. People keep using Bitcoin because, again, it's a complete inverse. There's no government. There's no company. There's no person. And the system, as I see it, would be very hard to destroy, because you're talking about decentralized all over the world, and there's a profit motive for mining it to keep the complex algorithms and all the things that beyond my pay grade. I just understand it. It's energy. So I don't think that you're wrong at all for asking that question. Is it a model to get people? But see, even these Bitcoin ETFs don't teach you how to use digital currency. They're not pushing the purchasing and use of Bitcoin. They're not doing that at all. They're saying, give us your funds and we'll show you a ledger that you hold Bitcoin through us. That's what this is. So this isn't even about just this whole story about ETFs and Bitcoin and adoption over the last week. It's only about them holding and not about usage. And it's certainly not about, having any sort of stake in it other than putting your fiat currency into a fiat currency bank that holds Bitcoin. So something is afoot. I think it's an important milestone that we're reaching here. And what's important is you have these establishment people. And I know it seems weird because we live in an age where things change so rapidly, but that's a momentous shift. If you went back to when I started Wise Wolf and I had my ATMs and Bitcoin, and I was what was it, 3,000 at the time, and I was buying in at 300 and some change in the 2016 range when I bought my first machines. So to have that shift from then, where you have, it's again, Warren Buffett, it's rat poison, all the establishment people coming in and saying that it's garbage and speculative. Look at the shift. Look at where it's ended up. And this isn't the end of the story, but this is a start. And I'm not going to buy a Bitcoin ETF. Why would you do that? Just go buy some Bitcoin. There's a machine on every corner. You can get it through Cash App. If you really needed to, you can get it through me. But I buy Bitcoin every single day. It's just, the reason these things go together is because you're watching the end of a dying system. And the dying system is the world's reserve currency, the dollar, and the dollar system, the fiat system. There's 52 times more currency today on Earth than there was in 1980. You got to pay attention to those numbers. 52 times. What does that mean? That means that 52 times more have diminished the scarcity and the value, not that it ever had really any value at all, but the value in units to the currency that you hold in your wallet. There's something wrong with how value is measured too. And Bitcoin is the inverse of that. Gold and silver are the inverse of that because they're finite. Bitcoin is hard finite. We know how much Bitcoin. You can have a find in gold or silver. Even if you did, it's still so expensive to get out of the ground. It won't really change. You can't really have inflation with the gold and silver as a monetary metal. Not really. It's balanced by population growth even. So all those three asset classes, gold, silver, Bitcoin, those are finite. Completely opposite of what the central bank is now. All right. Let me see what else I can get into today. I had so many stories pulled up. All right, let's end with this, and then I want to plug a little bit. Yeah, Harp says, cheers, Tony. Me personally, I'll stick with gold and silver. Spare a Dime says anything is possible. Yeah, absolutely. Anything's possible. Again, I'm not endorsing, I'm not telling you to go buy anything. I'm telling you to look at something, because the system itself, the fiat currency system, is changing. It's morphing. You don't want to when the Tower of Babel's falling over, get out of the way. Okay. This is, I think, where we're headed in the future. And this was by design. People say the rich got richer. Of course they did. This is CNN Business. The wealth of the world's 5 richest men more than doubled since 2020. Now, what happened in 2020? I thought we're all in this together. Oh, no, it's because you weren't essential. Remember? And President Fauci came in and made sure that all of these businessmen profited. You know, it's funny. I think each one of these guys has ties to government in some way. The 5 wealthiest people on earth have become a whole lot richer in recent years. First of all, put an asterisk next to that. You can't, the 5 richest people on earth aren't in this article. Since 2020, these billionaires, by the way, the world's richest people are trillionaires. Since 2020, these billionaires' net worth has skyrocketed 114% to a total of $869 billion after taking inflation into account, according to Oxfam's annual inequality report released Sunday. If current trends continue, the world could see its first trillionaire in a decade. Well, there already are trillionaires. They're banking dynasties left over from the 19th century. Go do your homework. At the same time, nearly 5 billion people globally have become poorer as they contend with inflation, war, and the climate crisis. Oh, you mean geoengineering? It would take nearly 230 years to eliminate poverty based on the current trajectory. The report, which draws on data compiled by Forbes, is timed to coincide with the kickoff of the annual World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, Switzerland, an elite gathering of some of the wealthiest people and world leaders. Well, okay, folks, I just wanted to bring this up because this is what there's a reason why these men get richer. Are they hoarding currency, or are they getting asset after asset? Once you get that momentum, they're getting more assets and more assets. They live off debt. Each one of these people, as far as I know, if I've never seen any of them, and I know for a fact a few of them have argued for higher taxes. So what does that mean? Wouldn't the world's richest people want a freer market? Absolutely not. Because a freer market means competition for them. Why do you think they like the current system? They can get richer and you get poorer, because the school system is going to teach you to chase those green pieces of paper. Never, ever, ever leverage yourself, because if you do, you can't make that leap. Don't do that, right? Stay in your comfort zone, your box. Just get into their products that put you into the casino. That's what this is all about. They get richer because they buy assets and live off, they borrow against it, tax-free debt. And none of them advocate for a free market. None of them advocate for lower taxes. That should be the tell. And that's because they're tied closely to the central bank. And that system in itself is based off of fake. So you have fake things. They use fake money to buy real assets. And that's why they keep getting richer. The school system's never going to teach you that. It's never going to teach you that, an asset that you can borrow against or that you can outpace inflation with is what makes you rich in the first place. All right. Just a little economic. I see stuff like that and I think that's a nice little economic lesson. All right. One last thing. Let's do a couple of tweets here and then I want to plug and get out. There was a couple couple of different tweets that were up on. Yeah. This is Robert Kiyosaki. Let me put this up on the screen. And of course, Gold Telegraph's a good account too. Inflation or deflation? This is Robert Kiyosaki. What if the PhDs at the White House, Treasury, and Fed put economy into hyperinflation? I hope not. But what if our leaders F up the dollar's collapse and we have hyperinflation? That's why I bought 5 more Bitcoin today. What are you going to do? Trust yourself, not our leaders. They're losers with PhDs. You got to love the old Marine. Kiyosaki's a Marine Corps Vietnam veteran, was a pilot in Vietnam for helicopters. And I saw a tweet up on Gold Telegraph. Yeah, and this is, again, economic uncertainty. The World Bank is warning that the Red Sea crisis could cause surging energy prices, slower growth, and higher inflation as the threat rises of disruption in world trade. Something to watch very closely, says Gold Telegraph. I absolutely agree. And just in case you were wondering, the Federal Reserve, its income after expenses came in at a negative $114.3 billion last year. Gold Telegraph says, yes, negative $114.3 billion. $114.3 billion in the negative. How do you lose money? When you make the money. That's where we are. The Federal Reserve loses money. It literally makes it, and it lost money. So did the Swiss National Bank. You know, the Swiss National Bank, irony of ironies, you know what they made money on? Gold. That's the only thing they made money on in the last 2 years. All right, folks. This has been the Wise Wolf Gold and Crypto Show. I appreciate all of you joining. Make sure you join the podcast anywhere podcasts are served up. Wise Wolf Gold and Crypto Show. There's more stuff that's going to hit that, interviews, all that stuff. I so appreciate your support. freeworld.fm. Go to Free World, sign up, join the chat. All kinds of great stuff coming up on Free World. Great host. We are building a lifeboat for free speech. You guys take care of each other. I'll see you next week. In a world of bulls and bears, be the wolf. Talk soon.